Have you ever felt completely drained after being around someone, as if your inner light had dimmed just by standing next to them? We often call it energy, vibe, or aura. But Edgar Cayce, the great American mystic, would say it's the soul's silent language, the invisible exchange between what we give and what we allow to be taken. Sometimes the people we try hardest to help are the very ones who quietly consume the light we need to keep walking our own path. This is not a matter of judgment or superiority. It is about understanding that every act of giving must come from a place of overflow, not from an empty cup. Because when the soul is tired, even kindness becomes a wound. There are souls who wander through life like travelers lost in the fog, unable to see their own way, clinging to anyone who shines enough to make them feel less alone. They are not evil. Most of them are simply unaware. They do not mean to drain you. They only seek warmth, guidance, or validation. But as Cayce taught, we cannot raise another soul by sinking to meet them. When we confuse compassion with self-sacrifice, we are not saving them. We are teaching them to lean on us instead of finding their own strength. True help never creates dependence. It awakens independence. Perhaps you've met someone who constantly complains about life, no matter how much you try to comfort or advise them. At first, you listen with empathy, believing your support might heal their pain. But over time, you notice how the conversation always circles back to their suffering, their injustice, their endless cycle of disappointment. They feed on your attention because it becomes the proof that they exist. Cayce described this pattern as psychic vampirism, not a supernatural curse, but an emotional one. It is what happens when someone forgets how to create their own light and begins to survive on the light of others. Then there are those who wear masks of charm, humility, or even spirituality. But behind the mask lies a deep hunger for control. They thrive on being needed, admired, or pitied. Anything that makes them the center of someone else's orbit. They will praise your generosity but never respect your boundaries. They will speak of love, but what they offer is attachment disguised as affection. Cayce often warned that such souls are unawakened mirrors. They reflect our goodness but never truly share it. The danger lies not in their presence, but in our illusion, in believing that love can fill the emptiness of another when that emptiness refuses to be healed. You might also encounter the perpetual victim, who wears their wounds like badges of identity. They don't seek healing, they seek witnesses. Their pain becomes their story, and they cling to it with devotion. Every act of kindness you offer becomes another reason for them to stay as they are. And when you finally step back to protect your peace, they call you cold, selfish, or ungrateful. It's a painful paradox. We want to help because we feel their suffering. But the deeper truth is this. Some souls are not asking for rescue. They are asking for an audience. And when we play the role they unconsciously assign to us, we are not helping. We are participating in their theater of stagnation. But even among these draining presences, there is a sacred invitation, a lesson whispered by the universe through each encounter. Perhaps these people come into our lives not as burdens, but as mirrors showing us where our compassion ends and our self-respect begins. Every time we choose peace over guilt, boundaries over exhaustion, we teach our soul that love does not mean self-erasure. Cayce believed that spiritual growth demands discernment. To discern is not to reject others. It is to recognize what is truly yours to carry. The universe does not ask you to save everyone, only to stay awake enough not to lose yourself in the process. And maybe that's the quiet truth hiding behind every draining relationship. They are not tests of endurance, but tests of clarity. They ask us silently, do you know where your soul ends and another's begins? When we finally learn to answer that question, we discover that love is not measured by how much we give, but by how deeply we remain aligned with the light that gives. Because only a soul that guards its flame can truly illuminate the darkness around it. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that love alone does not heal. We are taught from childhood that kindness is limitless, that helping others is always noble, that to say no is selfish. But Cayce would remind us that no act of love can violate the laws of spirit. One of those laws is balance. Just as the ocean gives and receives through its tides, the soul must learn to flow, to give, to rest, to restore. When we help without discernment, We disturb that natural rhythm, and what was once compassion becomes imbalance. The universe does not ask for endless giving, it asks for conscious giving. Love without awareness becomes a current that pulls us under instead of lifting both souls higher. It is easy to see the draining nature of obvious negativity, the gossipers, the manipulators, the constant victims. But Cayce warned of subtler forms of energy depletion, those that wear the mask of virtue. There are people who seem endlessly humble, selfless to a fault, yet their humility is a silent demand. They want you to mirror it, to sacrifice as they do, to prove your goodness through exhaustion. Their suffering becomes a moral measure. If you rest while they suffer, you are guilty. If you protect your peace, you are unkind. These are the martyrs of energy, and they do not seek light, they seek validation through depletion. To love them wisely is to refuse their invitation to drown. The same principle applies to those who live in constant drama, emotional storms that never end, because peace would leave them without a story. They create chaos unconsciously, then seek rescuers to calm the waves they themselves stirred. The empath, drawn by a deep sense of purpose, enters their sea again and again, hoping to anchor stability. But as Cayce noted, you cannot still another's waters while your own are restless. When we dive into someone's emotional chaos, without grounding ourselves first, we lose the clarity that allows true compassion to function. We begin to confuse their lessons with ours, their emotions with our own, and little by little we start speaking their language of pain. And yet, we must not harden our hearts. To guard your energy does not mean to stop loving. It means to love without losing the shape of your soul. Think of a candle. Its flame warms and illuminates, but it cannot light another if it has melted into nothing. Boundaries are not walls. They are the sacred lines that keep our inner flame alive. In spiritual terms, setting boundaries is an act of trust in divine order. It says, I believe that each soul is capable of finding its own light. When we stop overhelping, we are not abandoning others, we are returning them to the teacher within themselves. That is what Cayce meant when he said, we are never meant to be the source, only the channel. Still, it takes courage to step away from those who drain us, especially when our heart aches for their healing. But here lies the paradox of growth. Sometimes love demands distance. There are lessons that can only unfold in solitude, and when we keep rescuing someone from their darkness, we interrupt their dialogue with the divine. Imagine a butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. If we tear it open to help, we deny it the very struggle that strengthens its wings. The same happens when we protect others from the weight of their own choices. We think we are being kind, but in truth, we are robbing them of transformation. The deeper truth is that every draining person who crosses our path is part of our curriculum in spiritual evolution. They teach us through contrast, showing us the cost of unguarded compassion, the fatigue of misplaced empathy, the quiet ache of ignoring our own needs. They remind us that even light needs a vessel. Without structure, even the brightest flame fades. Each time we learn to say, this is not mine to carry, we reclaim a piece of our energy, our clarity, our sovereignty. And in that act, we do not close our hearts, we refine them. So perhaps the real question is not, how do I protect myself from these people? But rather, what part of me still believes I must save them? For often, behind our exhaustion lies a subtle pride, the belief that others cannot find their way without our light. But light does not belong to anyone. It is not ours to give or keep. It flows through us, as long as we remain aligned with truth. To protect your soul, then, is to remember that love's highest form is not rescue. It is respect. Respect for your journey, for theirs, and for the sacred intelligence that guides both. There is a subtle awakening that begins when we stop confusing rescue with love. At first, it feels uncomfortable, almost cruel, to pull back from someone who depends on our energy. The heart protests, whispering, if I don't help, who will? But in that question hides an illusion that we are indispensable to another soul's journey. Edgar Cayce often spoke of divine order, the quiet intelligence that governs all things. He said that when we interfere with another's karmic lesson, even in the name of compassion, we create imbalance for both. Life in its wisdom will always restore that balance, sometimes through distance, silence, or endings we didn't choose. These are not punishments, they are corrections of energy. As we awaken to this truth, we begin to see that helping is not always love, and distance is not always abandonment. Some souls enter our lives as invitations to practice detachment, not the cold, indifferent kind, but the warm detachment of one who trusts that every being carries their own inner compass. It is the kind of love that says, "I see your pain, but I trust your path." This is the highest form of respect, to believe that the universe knows what it's doing, even when it breaks our hearts to watch. Cayce described this as loving through the spirit rather than the flesh, meaning love that does not cling, demand, or control, love that allows each soul to unfold in its own divine timing. Yet this understanding does not come easily. Our culture glorifies saviors. We are told that being good means always being available, always saying yes, always carrying more. But goodness without wisdom becomes a chain. When we ignore our own fatigue, we are not being selfless, we are being disconnected from the soul's rhythm. Imagine a musician who never pauses between notes, the melody becomes noise. Likewise, a soul that never rests, never renews, loses its harmony. The pauses, the quiet no, the gentle withdrawal, the moments of solitude, are the sacred rests in the song of our being. Without them, even love loses its beauty. Sometimes the people who drain us the most are not strangers or casual acquaintances, but those closest to us, family, partners, lifelong friends. That is why it hurts so deeply. We feel that stepping back is betrayal. But truthfully, it is a greater act of love to be honest about what we can give than to offer what we no longer have. Cayce taught that truth without love is cruelty, but love without truth is illusion. We must learn to hold both. The truth that says, "I cannot carry this anymore," and the love that whispers, "But I still wish you peace." When we speak from that place, even distance becomes a form of blessing. And there is another layer, the draining person within us, the part that clings, complains, fears being alone, feeds on validation or pity. It's easy to point outward, to name the takers and manipulators, but true spiritual maturity turns the mirror inward. Have we, at times, been the ones drawing light from others because we forgot our own source? Cayce believed that every relationship is a mirror reflecting our state of consciousness. To recognize the energy vampire outside is to confront the unhealed part inside. And when we meet that part with compassion instead of shame, something miraculous happens. We stop resonating with the same patterns. The people who once drained us no longer find a home in our vibration. Gradually, we discover that protecting our energy is not about rejection, it's about resonance. The soul operates by vibration. What we hold within determines what we attract. When we carry guilt, we draw those who need rescuing. When we carry clarity, we attract those walking in their own strength. Boundaries, then, are not fences, but frequencies. They say to the universe, "This is the energy I choose to dwell in." Cayce's readings often emphasize that spiritual protection is not built through defense but through alignment. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions move in harmony with truth, nothing lower in vibration can hold on to you for long. Light does not fight darkness, it simply shines, and the darkness dissolves. As we integrate these realizations, a new kind of peace begins to take root. The peace that comes from knowing that our love is not a currency to be spent, but a light to be sustained. We no longer need to fix, convince, or carry others to prove our goodness. Instead, we offer presence, example, and respect, the quiet gifts of a soul that has learned to stand in its own light. Cayce once said, "The spirit of love is the spirit of oneness." And oneness does not mean merging into another's pain. It means recognizing the divine thread that connects all, while still honoring the individuality of each path. In that awareness, love transforms from sacrifice into serenity, and then something subtle but powerful begins to shift. The same encounters that once drained us now reveal themselves as sacred teachers. They were never meant to steal our light, only to show us where it leaked. Every person who exhausted us was in truth a messenger sent to remind us of our forgotten worth. We begin to see that energy exchange is not about good or bad people, but about alignment and awareness. When we are centered in spirit, even the most difficult personalities lose their power over us, because we no longer seek from them what can only come from within. As Cayce often emphasized, no soul is ever hurt by another. It is only the self that forgets its source. There comes a day when you stop rescuing and start radiating. You no longer try to convince anyone to heal, to see, to change. You simply embody peace, and strangely, that peace becomes the greatest help you can offer. It speaks without words, teaching through presence what endless advice could not. Some people will still choose pain, and that's all right. Their soul has its own tempo, its own curriculum. Your task is not to accelerate their awakening, but to honor your own. When you walk in alignment, those who are ready will rise with you naturally, not because you pushed them, but because your vibration reminded them of their own forgotten light. To live this way requires faith. Faith that letting go is sometimes the most loving thing we can do. We must trust that the same divine intelligence guiding our path is also guiding theirs. Just as a seed knows when to sprout and when to rest in darkness, every soul has its season of awakening. You cannot rush another spring without destroying their roots. So we learn to bless the distance, to love from afar, to release without resentment. We understand that closure is not always spoken, sometimes it is lived. Cayce wrote that every separation, rightly understood, is preparation for a higher union. When we let go with love, the bond evolves instead of breaks. And as we grow into this new awareness, compassion itself matures. It becomes less emotional, more luminous, no longer driven by the need to fix, but by the quiet joy of witnessing divine order at work. We begin to sense that everyone, no matter how lost, is held by something larger, wiser, and infinitely patient. The universe is never in a hurry. Its lessons unfold with perfect timing. So when someone tries to draw you into their chaos, you can now smile gently and remember, this is not mine to carry. Not from coldness, but from clarity. Because you finally know that the most sacred offering you can make to another soul is your own stability. Over time, this wisdom reshapes how we move through the world. We stop chasing emotional debts, stop over-explaining our boundaries, stop apologizing for our peace. We realize that the energy we once spent trying to save others is now available for creation, joy, and presence. We begin to attract those who give as deeply as they receive, souls who walk beside us, not behind or ahead. The draining relationships fade, not because we reject them, but because we no longer feed them. Energy follows attention, and where our attention is love without attachment, only harmony can remain. In this balance, we discover the beauty of true service, service that uplifts without depleting, that flows without forcing. And when you look back, you'll see that the very people who once exhausted you were catalysts for your awakening. They carved boundaries where there were none, taught discernment where there was only blind giving, and revealed the difference between helping and healing. Their presence was a mirror reflecting what your soul still needed to remember. That love begins with awareness. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot offer peace while your own heart is in turmoil. The act of protecting your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of reverence for the divine spark within you, for only a soul that guards its flame can truly illuminate others without losing itself in the dark. So, if there are people in your life who seem to drain your spirit, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this mine to carry? And if the answer is no, bless them, release them, and return to your center. Remember what Cayce taught, that every encounter is an opportunity for the soul to choose love with wisdom. Protecting your light does not mean closing your heart. It means learning to love in alignment with truth. The world does not need more rescuers. It needs more awakened hearts, those who shine steadily, who inspire by being, who remind others that every soul, no matter how lost, carries the same divine fire waiting to be reignited. If this reflection touched something within you, share your thoughts below. Your experiences, your awakenings, your lessons learned from those who once drained your light. Each story adds another flame to our shared circle of understanding. And if you wish to keep walking this path of clarity and soul wisdom, subscribe and stay close. Together, we will continue to learn, not how to save the world, but how to stay radiant within it.